polite not to listen.
Oh, I'm sorry for that. Have you got the cucumber sandwiches cut for Lady Bracknell?
Yes, sir.
Oh, by the way, Lane, I see from your book that on Thursday night, while Lord Shoreham and Mr. Worthing were dining with me, 8 bottles of champagne and entities haven't been consumed.
Yes, sir. 8 bottles and a pint.
Why is it that, at a bachelor's establishment, the servants invariably drink my champagne? I merely ask confirmation.
I attribute it to the superior quality of wine, sir. I've often observed in married households the wine is rarely a first-rate brand.
Good heavens! Is marriage so demoralizing as that?
I believe it is a pleasant state. I've only been married once up to the present. A misunderstanding between me and another young person.
I don't know that I have much interest in your family life, Lane, really.
Yes, sir. I don't think of it much myself.
Very natural, I'm sure. The bell, Lane!
Yes, sir.
Lane's views on marriage seem somewhat lax. Really, the law orders don't set us an example. What on earth is the use of them? They seem as a class with absolutely no sense of moral responsibility.
Mr. Earnest Worthing.
How do you do, my dear Ernest? What brings you up to town?
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. What else should bring anyone anywhere? Eating as usual, I see, Algy.
I believe it is customary in good society to take some slight refreshment at 5 o'clock. Where have you been since last Thursday?
Oh, in the country.
And what on earth do you do there?
When one is in town, one amuses oneself. When one is in the country, one amuses other people. It's excessively boring.
And who are the people that you amuse?
Oh, neighbors. Neighbors.
Got nice neighbors in your part of Shropshire.
Perfectly horrid. Never speak to any of them.
How immensely you must amuse them. By the way, Shropshire is your county.
Shropshire? Oh, yes, of course. Hello. Why all these cups? Why cucumber sandwiches? Who is coming to tea?
Oh, merely Aunt Augusta and Gwendolyn.
How perfectly delightful.
Yes, that is all very well, but I'm afraid Aunt Augusta won't quite approve of your being here.
May I ask why?
My dear fellow, the way you flirt with Gwendolyn is perfectly disgraceful. It is almost as bad as the way Gwendolyn flirts with you.
I am in love with Gwendolyn. I've come up to town expressly to propose to her.
I thought you had come up for pleasure. I call that business.
Oh, how utterly unromantic you are.
It is very romantic to be in love, but there's nothing romantic about a definite proposal. Why one may be accepted, well, I believe one usually is, then the excitement is all over. The very essence of romance is uncertainty. Please don't touch the cucumber sandwiches. Those are ordered specially for Aunt Augusta.
Well, you have been eating them all the time.
That is quite a different matter. She's my aunt. Have some bread and butter. The bread and butter is for Gwendolyn. Gwendolyn is devoted to bread and butter.
And very good bread and butter, too.
Well, my dear fellow, you need not eat as if you're going to eat it all. You behave as if you're married to her already, and I don't think you'll ever will be.
Why on earth do you say that?
Girls never marry the men they flirt with. Girls don't think it right.
That's nonsense, Algy.
It isn't. It accounts for the extraordinary amount of bachelors one sees all over town. And in the second place, I don't give my consent.
Your consent!
My dear fellow, Gwendolyn is my first cousin, and before I allow you to marry her, you will have to clear up the whole question of Cecily.
Cecily? What do you mean, Algy, by Cecily? I don't know anyone of that name.
Lane! Bring me the cigarette case Mr. Worthing left in the smoking room the last time he dined here.
Yes, sir.
Do you mean to say you've had my cigarette case all this time? I wish to goodness you let me know. I've been writing frantic letters to the Scotland Yard about it. I was nearly offering a large reward.
Well, I wish you would offer one. I happen to be more than usually hard up.
Well, there's no good offering a large reward now that the thing is found.
I think it's rather mean of you, Ernest, I must say. However, now that I look at the inscription inside, I find this thing isn't yours after all.
You have no right to read what is written inside. It is very ungentlemanly to read a private cigarette case.
Yes, that may be. But this case is a present from someone of the name of Cecily. And you said you didn't know any of that name.
Well, if you must know, Cecily happens to be my aunt.
Your aunt?
Yes, charming old lady too. She lives at Tunbridge Wells.
Yes, but she's your aunt that lives at Tunbridge Wells. Why does she call herself Little Cecily? From Little Cecily with the fondest love.
My dear fellow, what on earth is there in that? Some aunts are tall, some aunts are not tall. You seem to think that every aunt should be exactly like your aunt, and that is absurd. For heaven's sake, give me back my cigarette case.
Yes, but that does not account for your small aunt who lives at Tunbridge Wells, who calls you her uncle. From Little Cecily with her fondest love to her dear Uncle Jack. There is no objection, I admit, to her not being a small aunt, but why an aunt, no matter what her size may be, call her own nephew her uncle, I can't quite make out. Besides, your name isn't Jack at all, it is Ernest.
It isn't Ernest, it's Jack.
You have always told me it was Ernest. You answer to the name of Ernest. I have introduced you to everyone to the name of Ernest. You look as if your name was Ernest. You are the most earnest-looking person I know. It is perfectly absurd you're saying that your name isn't Ernest. It is on your cards. Here is one of them. Mr. Ernest Worthing, B4, the Albany. I'll keep this as proof if you ever attempt to deny it to me, or to Gwendolyn, or to anyone else.
Well, my name is Earnest in town, and Jack in the country. That cigarette case was given to me in the country.
Yes, but that does not account for your small aunt who lives at Tunbridge Wells. However, I may mention that I've always suspected you being a secret and confirmed Bunburyist, and I'm quite sure of it now.
Bunburyist? What on earth do you mean?
I'll reveal the meaning of that incomparable expression as soon as you are kind enough to reveal to me why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
Well, produce my cigarette case first.
Here it is. Now produce your explanation.
Well, when I was a very little boy, old Mr. Thomas Cardew found me and gave me the name of Worthing, and in his will, he made me guardian to his granddaughter, Miss Cecily Cardew. Cecily, who addresses me as her uncle from motives of respect that you could not possibly appreciate, lives at my place in their country on the charge of her admirable governess, Miss Prism.
And where is that place in the country, may I ask?
That is nothing to you, dear boy. You are not going to be invited.
I suspected that, my dear fellow, for I have Bunburied all over Shropshire on 2 separate occasions. Now go on. Why are you Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, when one is placed in the position of a guardian, one has to adopt a very high morale tone on all subjects. It is one's duty to do so, and as a high morale tone can be said to conduct much to either's want, health, or happiness. I have always pretended to have a younger brother of the name of Earnest, who lives at the Albany and gets into the most dreadful of scrapes. There, my dear Algy, is the whole truth, pure and simple.
Oh, the truth is rarely pure and never simple. What you are is a Bunburyist, and one of the most advanced Bunburyists I know.
What on earth do you mean?
Well, you have invented a very useful younger brother of the name of Earnest, in order that you may be able to go into town as often as you like. I have invented a very useful and permanent invalid of the name of Bunbury, in order that I may be able to go into the country as often as I like. Bunbury is a dreadful invalid, and poor Bunbury is perfectly invaluable. I wouldn't be able to dine with you at the castle tonight, for I have been really engaged to Aunt Augusta for more than a week.
I haven't asked you to dine anywhere with me tonight.
Oh, I know. You are perfectly careless about sending out invitations. Nothing annoys people more than not getting an invitation.
You're much better down with Aunt Augusta.
Oh, I haven't the smallest intention of doing anything of the kind. To begin with, I dine there on Monday, and once a week is quite enough to dine with one's own relations. In the second place, whenever I do dine there, I'm always treated as a member of the family, and either sent down with no one at all, or two. And in the third place, I know perfectly well whom she'll place me next to. She'll place me next to Mary Farquhar, who always flirts with her own husband across the dinner table. It is not very pleasant, indeed it is not even decent, and that sort of thing is enormously on increase. The amount of women in London who flirt with their own husbands is perfectly scandalous. It looks so bad. It is simply washing one's clean linens in public. However, now that I know you to be a secret income Bunbury, I am quite naturally going to talk to you about bumbering. I want to tell you the rules.
I am not a Bumbarius at all. If Gwendolyn accepts me, I am going to kill my brother Earnest. In fact, I think I'll kill him in any case. Cecily is far too interested in him. It is rather a bore. And in fact, I'd advise you to do the same with Mr. Invalid, absurd name, whatever.
Nothing will induce me to part with Bunbury. If you ever get married, which seems extremely problematic, I'll have you know you'll be very glad to know Bunbury. A man who does not marry without Bunbury has a very tedious time with it.
If Gwendolyn accepts me and we get married, I don't see why I should know Bunbury at all.
Then your wife will. You see, my dear fellow, in married life, 3 is company and 2 is none. Now, if I get Aunt Augusta out of the way for 10 minutes, will you dine with me at the Carlton tonight?
I suppose so, if you want to.
Yes, but you must be serious. I hate it when people aren't serious about meals. It is very shallow of them.
Lady Bracknell and Miss Fairfax.
Aunt Augusta!
Well, dear Algernon, I hope you are behaving well.
I'm feeling well.
That's not quite the same thing. In fact, the two rarely go together. Good afternoon, Mr. Worthing. How do you do?
Dear me, you are smart.
I am always smart, aren't I, Mr. Worthing?
Ah, you are quite perfect, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, I hope I am not that. That would leave no room for developments, and I intend to develop in many directions.
I'm sorry we're a little late, Algernon, but I was obligated to call on dear Lady Harbury. I hadn't been there since her poor husband's death. I've never seen a woman so altered. She looks quite 20 years younger. I'll have a cup of tea and some of those nice cucumber sandwiches you promised me.
Lane, where are the cucumber sandwiches? I ordered them specially for Aunt Augusta.
I went to the market twice this morning. There were none.
No cucumbers?
Not even for ready money.
That will do, Lane.
Thank you, sir.
Aunt Augusta, I am greatly distressed about there no being cucumbers, not even for ready money.
It really makes no matter, Algernon. I had some crumpets with Lady Harbury, who seems to me to be living entirely for pleasure now.
I hear her hair's turned quite gold from grief.
It certainly has changed colour. From what cause, I, of course, can't say. Thank you for the tea, Algernon. I have quite a treat for you tonight. I'm going to send you down next to Mary Farquhar. She is such a nice young woman and so attentive to her husband. It is delightful to watch them.
I'm afraid, Aunt Augusta, I will have to give the great pleasure of dining with you tonight after all.
I certainly hope not, Algernon. That would put my table completely out. Your uncle would have to dine upstairs. Fortunately, he's accustomed to that.
It is a great bore, but the fact is I have just received a telegram saying that my poor friend Bunbury has fallen quite ill, and they suggest I should be with him.
That is very strange. This Mr. Bunbury seems to suffer from curiously bad health.
Yes, poor Bunbury's a dreadful invalid.
Well, I must say, Algernon, that I think it's high time that Mr. Bunbury made up his mind whether he was going to live or die. This shilly-shallying with the question is absurd. nor do I in any way approve of this modern sympathy with invalids. I consider it morbid. Illnesses of any kind is hardly to be encouraged in others. Health is the primary duty of one's life. I am always telling that to your poor uncle, but he never seems to take any notice as far as his ailments goes. I would feel much obliged if you would ask Mr. Bunbury from me to not have a fatal relapse on Saturday, for I rely on you to arrange my music for me. It is my last reception, and one wants something to inspire conversation, particularly at the end of the season when practically everything that needs to be said has been said.
I'll speak to Bunbury on Augusta, if he is still conscious. And of course, music is a great difficulty. But I'll run over the program I've drawn out if you'll come with me in the next room for just a moment.
Thank you, Algernon. It is very thoughtful of you. I'm sure the program will be delightful after a few expurgations. Gwendolyn, you will follow.
Charming day it's been, Miss Fairfax.
Oh, pray don't talk to me about the weather, Mr. Worthing. Whenever people talk to me about the weather, I feel quite certain it means something else. And that makes me so nervous.
I do mean something else.
I thought so.
And I would like to take advantage of Lady Bracknell's temporary
I
absence.
would certainly advise you to do so. Mamma has a way of coming back suddenly into a room that I have to speak to her about.
Miss Fairfax, ever since I met you, I've admired you more than any girl I've ever met. Since I met you.
Yes, I am quite aware of the fact. And I often wish that in public, at any rate, you had been a bit more demonstrative. For me, you have always held an irresistible fascination. Even before I met you, I was far from indifferent to you. We live, as I hope you know, Mr. Worthing, in an age of ideals. The fact is constantly being mentioned in the more expensive monthly magazines. And my ideal has always been to love someone in the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that inspires absolute confidence. From the moment Algernon mentioned to me he had a friend called Earnest, I knew I was destined to love you.
You really love me, Gwendolyn?
Passionately.
Darling! You don't know how happy you made me!
My own Earnest.
But you don't mean to say that you couldn't love me if my name wasn't Earnest?
But your name is Earnest.
Yes, of course. But supposing that it was something else.
Oh, that is clearly a metaphysical speculation. And as all metaphysical speculation has very little reference to the actual facts of life as we know them.
Well, to speak quite candidly, my dear, I don't care much for the name of Earnest. I don't think it suits me at all.
It suits you perfectly. It is a divine name. It has a music of its own. It produces vibrations.
Well, really, darling, I think there are a lot of other much nicer names. I think, for instance, Jack, a charming name.
Jack? No, there is very little music in the name Jack, if any at all, indeed. It does not thrill. It produces no vibrations. I have known several Jack, and they all, without exception, were more than unusually plain. Besides, Jack is notorious domesticity for John, and I pity any woman married to a man called John. She would probably never know the entrancing pleasure of a single moment's solitude. No, the only really safe name is Ernest.
Gwendolyn, I must get christened at once. I mean, we must get married at once.
Married, Mr. Worthing?
Well, yes. You know that I love you, and you've led me to believe that you're not entirely indifferent to me.
I adore you. But you haven't proposed to me yet. Nothing has been said at all about the subject of marriage.
Well, may I propose to you now?
I think it would be an admirable opportunity. And to spare you any possible disappointment, I think it only fair to tell you quite frankly beforehand that I am fully determined to accept you.
Then, Gwendolyn, will you marry me?
Oh, of course I will, darling! I'm afraid you have very little experience in how to propose.
My own? You're the only one I've ever loved in my life.
Yes, but men often propose for practice. Oh, Ernest, what wonderfully blue eyes you have. They are quite blue. I hope you will always always look at me just like that, especially when there are other people present.
Mr. Worthing! Rise, sir, from this semi-recumbent posture. It is most indecorous.
Mamma, I must beg you to retire. This is no place for you. Besides, Mr. Worthing is not quite yet finished.
Finished what, may I ask?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing.
You are not engaged to anyone. When you do become engaged to someone, I or your father, should his health permit him, will inform you of the fact. An engagement should always come at a young girl as a surprise, pleasant or unpleasant. It is hardly a matter she should be able to decide for herself. And now, Mr. Worthing, I have a few questions to put to you. And while I am making these inquiries, you, Gwendolen, will wait for me below in the carriage.
But, Mamma!
In the carriage, Gwendolen!
Yes, Mamma.
Gwendolen, the carriage! You can take a seat, Mr. Worthing.
Thank you, Lady Bracknell. I prefer standing.
Mr. Worthing, I feel bound to tell you that you're not down on my list of eligible young men. I have the same list, however, as the great Duchess of Bolton does. We work together, in fact. However, I am ready to enter your name, should your answers permit what an affectionate mother requires. Do you smoke?
Well, yes, I must admit I do.
I am pleased to hear it. A man should always have an occupation of some sort. There are far too many idle men in London as it is. How old are you?
28.
A very good age to be married at. I am always in the opinion that a man who desires to get married should either know everything or nothing. Which do you know?
I know nothing, Lady Bracknell.
I am pleased to hear it. I do not approve of anything that tampers with the natural ignorance. Ignorance is like a delicate, exotic fruit. Touch it and the bloom has gone. What is your income?
Between 7,000 and 8,000 a year.
In or in investment?
In investments, chiefly.
That is satisfactory. What between the duties expected from one during one's lifetime and the duties extracted from one after one's death? Land has ceased to be for profit or pleasure. It gives one position and prevents one from keeping it up. But that's all that can be said about land.
I have a country house, too, with some land attached to it, of course. 1,500 acres, I believe.
A country house? How many bedrooms? Well, that matter can be cleared up afterwards. You have a townhouse, I hope. A sweet, unspoiled nature like Gwendolen could hardly be able to reside in the country.
Well, yes, I own a house in Belgrave Square. It is let by the year to Lady Bloxham. I could get it at any moment, of course, with 6 months' notice.
Lady Bloxham? I don't know her.
Oh, she goes about very little. She is a lady considerably advanced in years.
Ah, nowadays there is no guarantee of respectability of character. What number in Belgrave Square?
149?
The unfashionable side, I knew there was something. However, that can easily be altered. And now to minor matters. Are your parents living?
I have lost both of my parents.
Both? To lose one parent may be regarded as a misfortune. To lose both seems like carelessness. Who was your father? Was he what the papers called a purple commerce, or did he rise from the ranks of aristocracy?
Well, Lady Bracknell, I said that I had lost both my parents. It would be nearly the truth to say that my parents seem to have lost me. You see, I was found.
Found?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I was found. Old Mr. Thomas Cardew found me and gave me the name of Worthing because he happened to have a first-class ticket for Worthing at the time. Worthing is a seaside resort in Sussex.
Where did this charitable gentleman with a first-class ticket to a seaside resort find you?
In a handbag.
A handbag?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, a handbag. A somewhat large leather handbag with handles to it. An ordinary handbag, in fact.
In what locality did this Mr. Thomas Cardew come across this ordinary handbag?
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station.
Mr. Worthing, I must admit I am somewhat bewildered by what you have just told me. To be born, or at any rate, bred, in a handbag, whether it has handles or not, seems to me to display a contempt of the ordinary decencies of family life that remind one of the worst excesses of the French Revolution. And I presume you know what unfortunate movement that led to? As for the particular locality in which the handbag was found, a cloaked room at a railway station serves to conceal a social indiscretion that has probably been indeed used for that purpose before now, but can hardly be regarded as an assured basis in good society.
Well, Lady Bracknell, what would you advise me to do? I would do anything to ensure Gwendolyn's happiness.
I would advise you, Mr. Worthing, to try and acquire some relations as soon as possible, and to make a definite effort to produce one parent of either sex before the season is quite over.
Well, I don't see how I could possibly do that. I can produce the handbag at any moment, of course. It is in my dressing room at home. I believe that should satisfy you, Lady Bracknell.
Me, sir? What does it have to do with me? You could only imagine that I and Lord Bracknell would only dream of allowing our only daughter, a girl brought up of the utmost care, to marry into a cloaked room and form an alliance with a handbag. Good morning, Mr. Worthing.
Good morning. For heaven's sake, stop playing that ghastly tune, Algie! How idiotic.
Didn't girls all right, old boy? You don't mean to say Gwendolyn refused you?
Oh, as far as Gwendolyn is concerned, we are engaged. As for her mother, never met someone so unbearable. She is such a gorgon. Algie, you don't think there's any chance of Gwendolyn becoming like her mother in 150 years? Do you?
All women become like their mothers. That is their tragedy. All men don't. That is theirs.
Is that clever?
It is perfectly phrased and quite as true as any observation in civilized life need be.
Well, I am sick to death of cleverness. Everybody is clever nowadays. You can't go anywhere without meeting clever people. It has become a public nuisance. I wish we had a few fools left.
Oh, we have?
We do? What do they talk about?
The fools? About the clever people, of course. And did you tell Gwendolyn about your being Ernest in town and Jack in the country?
My dear fellow, one does not tell these things to sweet, refined girls like Gwendolyn. What extraordinary ideas you have about the ways to behave to a woman.
The only way to behave to a woman is to make love to her if she is pretty, and to someone else if she is plain.
That's nonsense.
What about your brother? What about the profligate Earnest?
Before the end of the week, I shall have gotten rid of him. I'll say he died in Paris of apoplexy. Lots of people die of apoplexy, don't they?
Yes, but it's hereditary. It's a sort of thing that runs in the families. You much rather say he died of a severe chill.
A severe chill is not hereditary.
Of course it isn't.
Very well then, my brother Earnest is carried off in Paris by a severe chill.
But I thought you had just said Miss Cardew is a little too much interested in your poor brother Earnest.
Yes, but Cecily is not one of those romantic girls. She just goes for long walks and pays no attention at all to her lessons.
I should like to meet Cecily.
I will take very good care that you never do. She is excessively pretty, and she's only just 18.
And have you told Gwendolyn about your having an excessively pretty and young ward who's only just 18?
My dear fellow, one doesn't blurt out these things to people. Besides, Gwendolyn and Cecily are for sure going to get along. I bet you sister.
Women only do that when they've called each other a lot of other things first. Now, if we're going to get a good table at the garden tonight, you must go and get ready. I'm hungry.
I never knew you weren't.
Miss Fairfax.
Gwendolyn, upon my word!
Algie, kindly turn your back. I have something very particular to say to Mr. Worthing.
Oh, I don't think I could do anything of the kind. Damn it!
Algie, pray oblige me by turning your back. Ernest, we may never be married. From the expression on Mama's face, I fear we never shall. Few parents nowadays pay any regard to what the children say to them. The old-fashioned respect for the young is rapidly dying out. Whatever influence I had on Mama, I lost at the age of 3. But though she may prevent us from becoming man and wife, and I may marry someone else, and marry often, nothing she could possibly do can alter my eternal devotion to you.
Gwendolyn, darling!
The story of your romantic origin, as related to me by Mama with unpleasing comments, has naturally stirred the deeper fibers of my nature. Your Christian name is exquisitely incomprehensible to me. Your time address at the Albany I have. What is your address in the country?
The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
And how long will you remain in town?
Till Monday.
Good. Algie, you may turn round now.
Thanks, I've turned around already.
You may also ring the bell.
Lane!
You will let me see you out, won't you?
Certainly.
I will see Miss Fairfax out.
Yes, sir.
Tomorrow, Lane, I'm going bumbering.
Yes, sir.
So pack up the smoking jackets, all my dress clothes, and the Bunbury suits. I won't be back until Monday morning.
Yes, sir.
Hope tomorrow will be a fine day, Lane.
It never is, sir.
You're perfectly pessimistic, you know that, Lane?
I do my best to satisfy.
There's a sweet, charming, innocent girl. The only girl I've ever loved in my life. What are you so amused at?
Oh, nothing. I'm just a little anxious about my poor friend Bunbury, that is all.
If you don't take care of your friend Bunbury, you'll get into some serious scrape someday.
But I love scrapes. They're the only things that aren't serious.
Algie, that's nonsense. All you ever talk about is nonsense.
But I love nonsense. The Manor House, Woolton, Hertfordshire.
Cecily? Cecily! Surely it is more Moulton's duty to water the flowers than yours. Your German grammar is on the table. Pray open it at page 15. We will repeat yesterday's lesson. But I don't like German. It isn't at all a becoming language. I know perfectly well that I feel quite plain after my German lesson. Child, you know how anxious your guardian is that you should improve yourself in every way. He laid particular stress on your German as he is leaving for town yesterday. Dear Uncle Jack is so very serious. Sometimes I think that he is so serious he cannot be quite well. Your guardian enjoys the best of health, and his gravity of demeanor, especially to be commended in one so comparatively young as he is. I know no one who has a higher sense of duty and responsibility. I suppose that is why he often looks quite bored when we three are together. Cecily, I'm surprised at you. Mr. Welling has many troubles in his life. Idle merriment and frivolity would be out of place in his conversation. You must remember his constant anxiety about that unfortunate young man, his brother. I do wish that Uncle Jack would allow him to come visit sometimes. We may have a great influence on him, Miss Prism. I know you certainly would. You know German and geology and all things of that sort that influence a man so much. I do not think that even I would have influence over a man who, according to his own brother's admission, is irretrievably weak and vacillating. Indeed, I do not think I would desire to reclaim him. I am not in favor of this modern mania for turning bad people into good people at a moment's notice. You must put away your diary, Cecily. I really don't see why you should keep a diary at all.
I keep a diary in order to record wonderful secrets of my life. I feel as if I don't write them down, I may forget all about them.
Memory, my dear Cecily, is the diary we all carry about with us.
Yes, but it usually chronicles the events of my life that have never happened and couldn't possibly have happened. This confounded dress. I believe that memory is responsible for nearly all the novels that Maudie sends us.
Do not speak slightingly of novels, Cicely. I wrote one myself in earlier days.
Was your novel ever published?
Alas, no. The manuscript, unfortunately, was abandoned. I use the word in the sense of lost or mislaid. To your work, child, these speculations are profitless.
Oh, but I see dear Dr. Chasuble coming up through the garden. Dr. Chasuble, this is indeed a pleasure.
And how are we this morning? Miss Prism, you are, I trust, well?
Miss Prism has just been complaining of a slight headache. I think it would do her so much good if she had a short stroll in the park with you, Dr. Chasuble.
Cicely, I've not mentioned anything about a headache.
No, dear Miss Prism, I know that. Although I felt instinctively that you had a headache. Indeed, I was thinking about that, and not my German lesson when the director came in.
I hope, Cecily, you're not inattentive.
Oh, I am afraid I am.
That is strange. Were I fortunate enough to be Miss Prism's pupil, I would hang upon her lips. I spoke metaphorically, of course. The metaphor was strong from these. Mr. Worthing, I suppose, has not returned from town yet.
We do not expect him till Monday afternoon.
Ah, yes, he usually likes to spend his Sundays in London. He's not one of those who so lame his enjoyment as, by all accounts, that unfortunate young man his brother seems to be. But I must not disturb Egeria and her people any longer.
Egeria? My name is Leticia, Doctor.
A classical illusion, merely drawn from the pagan authors. I will see you both no doubt at evensong.
I think, dear Doctor, I will have a stroll with you. I find I have a headache after all, and a walk might do it good.
With pleasure, Miss Prism, with pleasure. We might go as far as the schools and back.
That will be delightful. Cecily, in my absence, you'll read your political economy, the chapter on the fall of Rubio Mohammed. It is so much too exciting for a young girl.
Horrid political economy! Horrid geography! Horrid German!
Mr. Ernest Worthing has just driven over from the station. He has brought his luggage with him.
Mr. Ernest Worthing before the Albany. Uncle Jack's brother! Did you tell him Mr. Worthing was in town?
Yes, miss. He seemed very much disappointed. I told him that you and Miss Prism were in the garden. He seemed rather anxious to speak to you privately for a moment.
Ask Mr. Worthing to come out here. And I suppose you should talk to the housekeeper about your room for him.
Yes, miss.
I've never met any really wicked person before. I am quite frightened. Although, I suppose he will look just like anyone else.
He does?
You are my little cousin Cecily, I'm sure.
You are under some strange mistake. I am not little. In fact, I believe I am more than usually tall for my age. And you, as I see from your card, are Uncle Jack's brother, my cousin Ernest. My wicked cousin Ernest.
I'm not really wicked at all, cousin Cecily. You mustn't think I'm wicked.
You are not. Then you have certainly been deceiving us all in a very inexcusable manner. I hope you're not leading a double life, pretending to be good and being really wicked all the time. That would be hypocrisy.
Of course, I have been rather reckless.
I'm glad to hear it.
And now that you mention the subject, I have been very bad in my own small way.
I don't think you should be so proud of that, although I'm sure it must have been quite pleasant.
But it is much pleasanter being here with you, cousin Cecily.
I can't understand why you're here at all. Uncle Jack won't be back till Monday afternoon.
It is a great disappointment, as really I am obliged to go upon Monday afternoon.
Oh, I think that you should wait until Uncle Jack arrives. I know he wants to speak to you about your immigrating.
About my what?
You're immigrating. He's sending you to Australia.
Australia? I'd sooner die.
Well, at dinner Wednesday night, he said that you would have to choose between this world, the next world, and Australia.
Oh, well, Cecily. The accounts I have received on Australia and the next world are not encouraging. This world is good enough for me.
Yes, but are you good enough for it?
I'm afraid I'm not. That is why I'm asking you to reform me. You may make that your mission, Cecily.
I'm afraid I've no time this afternoon.
Then do you mind my reforming myself this afternoon?
That is rather quixotic of you, but I think you should try.
I will. I feel better already.
You are looking a little worse.
That is because I'm hungry.
How thoughtless of me! I should have remembered that when one is trying to lead an entirely new life, one requires regular and wholesome meals. Where'd you come in?
Thank you. Won't you give me a rose?
Oh, Mary Chanel.
No, I'd rather a pink rose.
Why?
Because you like a pink rose, Cousin Cecily.
I don't think it is right of you to talk to me like that. Miss Prism never says such things to me.
Because Miss Prism is a short-sighted old lady. You are the prettiest girl I ever saw.
Miss Prism says that good looks are a snare.
And a snare every sensible man would like to be caught in.
I don't think I would care to get a sensible man. I wouldn't have anything to talk to him about. Where is Cecily?
You were too much alone, dear doctor. You should get married. A misanthrope I can understand. A womanthrope, never.
The precept as well as the practice of the primitive church was distinctly against matrimony.
That is obviously the reason why the primitive church has not lasted to the present day. And you do not seem to realize, dear doctor, that by persistently remaining single, a man converts himself into a permanent public temptation.
But is a man not equally as attractive when married?
No married man is ever attractive except to his wife.
And often I've been told not even to her.
But where is Cecily?
Perhaps she followed us to the schools.
Mr. Worthing!
Mr. Worthing!
I have arrived sooner than I expected. Dr. Chasuble, I hope you're well.
Dear Mr. Worthing, I trust this garb of woe does not betoken some terrible calamity.
My brother.
More shameful debts and extravagancies?
Still leading his life of pleasure. Dead! Your brother Earnest dead!
What? Dead?
What a lesson for him. I trust you'll profit by it.
Mr. Worthing, I offer you my sincere condolences. You are at the very least the consolation of knowing you are one of the most forgiving and generous of brothers.
Poor Earnest. He had many faults, but it is a sad blow.
Very sad indeed. Were you with him at the end?
No! He got carried away off in Paris. I received a telegram from the manager last night.
Was the cause of his death mentioned?
A severe chill, it seems.
None of us are perfect. I myself am particularly susceptible to draughts. Will the interment take place here?
No! He seemed to have expressed desire to be buried abroad.
I fear that hardly points you in a very serious state of mind at the last. You will no doubt wish me to make some slight allusion to this tragic domestic affliction, won't you? My sermon on the meaning of the man and the wilderness can be adapted to almost any occasion, joyful or, as in the present case, distressing. I have preached it at harvest celebrations, christenings, confirmations, on days of humiliation, and feast days. The last time I delivered it was in the cathedral as a charity sermon, on behalf of the Society for the Prevention of Discontent among the upper classes. The bishop who was present was much struck by some of the analogies I drew.
That reminds me, Dr. Chasuble. You mentioned christenings? I suppose you know how to christen, all right, or you are practicing christenings often.
It is, I regret to say, one of the rector's most constant duties in his parish. I have often spoken to the poor classes on the subject, but they don't seem to know what thrift is.
But is there any particular infant in whom you are interested, Mr. Worthing? Your brother was, as I believe, unmarried, was he not?
Oh, yes, quite unmarried.
People who live entirely for pleasure usually are.
No, this is for no child, Dr. Chasuble. I would like to be christened myself, this afternoon if you have nothing better to do.
But surely, Mr. Worthing, you've already been christened.
I don't remember anything about it. But I don't know if this will make you feel uncomfortable in any way, or if you think I am a little too old now.
Oh no, the sprinkling and indeed immersion are perfectly canonical practice.
Immersion?
Oh no, you need have no apprehensions. Sprinkling is all that is necessary, and I think indeed advisable. Our weather is so changeable. What time would you wish the ceremony to be performed?
Oh, I might trot round 5, if that would suit you.
Oh, perfectly. In fact, I have 2 similar cases around the very same time. A case of twins that occurred in one of the outlying cottages on your own estate. Poor Jenkins the carter, a most hard-working man.
I would not like to be christened along with other children. It would be too childish. Would 5:30 do?
Admirably. Now, Mr. Worthing, I will not intrude into a house of sorrow any longer. I merely beg you not to be too bowed down. What seems to us as bitter trials are often blessings in disguise.
This seems to me a blessing of an extremely obvious kind. Uncle Jack! Oh, I am pleased to see you back. What horrid clothes you've got on. Do go and change them. Cecily! What's the matter, Uncle Jack? Do you look happy? You look as if you've had a toothache. And I've got such a surprise for you. Who do you think is in the dining room? Your brother! Your brother Ernest! He arrived here half an hour ago.
I don't know what you're talking about. I haven't got a brother.
Oh, don't say that. However badly he may have behaved to you in the past, he's still your brother. You couldn't be so heartless as to disown him. I would tell him to come out, and you will shake hands with him, won't you, Uncle Jack?
These are very joyful tidings.
After we had been all resigned to his loss, his sudden return seems to me particularly distressing.
My brother is in the dining room. I don't know what it all means. It seems to me to be perfectly absurd. Good heavens!
Brother John, I've come up from town expressly to tell you that I'm very sorry for all the faults that I have caused you, and that I intend to lead a better life.
Go away!
Uncle Jack, you're not going to refuse your own brother's hand.
Nothing will induce me to take his hand. I think his coming down here is disgraceful. He knows perfectly well why.
Uncle Jack, do be nice. There is some good in everyone. Ernest has just been telling me about his poor invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, whom he goes to visit so often.
I'd admit all the faults were on my side, but I find Brother John's coldness peculiarly painful. I expected more enthusiastic welcome, especially considering it is my first time here.
Uncle Jack, if you don't shake hands with Ernest, I will never forgive you.
I suppose I must then.
It's pleasant, is it not, to see so perfect a reconciliation? I think we might leave the 2 brothers to themselves.
Cecily, you will come with me.
Certainly, Miss Prism.
Algie! You must... What? You must leave immediately! I do not allow any bun burying here!
I put Mr. Earnest's things in the room next to yours, sir. I suppose that is all right.
What?
I'm afraid I cannot stay for more than a week. This time.
Merryman, order the dog cart at once. Mr. Earnest has been suddenly called back to town.
Yes, sir.
Jack, Cecily is a darling.
I do not want you talking of Miss Cardew like that. I don't like it.
Well, I don't like your clothes. You look perfectly ridiculous in them. It is also perfectly childish for you to be in deep mourning over a man who is staying as a guest in your own home.
You are not staying as a guest or as anything else. You must leave by the 4:05 train.
But I can't leave, you see. My dear friend is in mourning. It would be most unkind of me. If I were in mourning, I would expect you to stay with me. It would be most unkind of you.
Will you go if I change my clothes?
Yes, but don't take so long. I never seen anyone take so long with such little result.
It is better than always being overdressed as you are!
Ah, there you are.
Oh, I merely came back to water the flowers. I thought you were with Uncle Jack.
He's gone to order the dog cart for me.
Oh, is he going to take you for a nice drive?
No, he's going to send me away.
Then we have got to part.
I'm afraid so.
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
It can wait. Merryman, for 5 minutes.
Yes, miss.
Cecily, if I cannot offend you, and I state quite openly and frankly that you are the visual personification of absolute perfection.
I think your frankness does you great credit, Ernest. If you allow me, I will copy your remarks into my diary.
Do you really keep a diary, Cecily? I'd give anything to read it.
Oh no. You see, it is simply a young girl's record of her own thoughts and impressions, and consequently meant for publication. But pray, Ernest, don't stop. I delight in taking down from dictation. I have reached absolute perfection. You may go on. I am quite ready for more.
Cecily, ever since I've laid eyes upon your wonderful and incomparable beauty, I've dared to love you wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly.
I don't think you should tell me that you love me wildly, passionately, devotedly, and hopelessly. Hopelessly doesn't seem to make much sense, does it?
Cecily!
The dog cart is at the door, sir.
Tell her to come around next week at the same hour, Merryman.
Yes, sir.
Uncle Jack will be very much annoyed if he knew you were staying round till next week at the same hour.
No, I don't care for Uncle Jack. I don't care for anyone else in this world, Cecily. I only care for you. You will marry me, won't you?
You silly boy! Why, we have been engaged for the last 3 months!
For the last 3 months.
Yes, it will be exactly 3 months on Thursday.
And how exactly did we become engaged?
Well, ever since Uncle Jack first confessed to us all that he had a younger brother who was very wicked and bad, you, of course, have formed the chief topic of conversation between myself and Miss Prism. And of course, a man who is much talked about is always very attractive. One feels that there may be something in him after all. I dare say it was foolish of me, but I fell in love with you, Ernest.
And when exactly was our engagement settled?
On the 14th of June last, worn out by your entire ignorance upon my existence, I decided to end the matter one way or the other. And after a long struggle with myself, I accepted you here. The next day, I bought this little ring in your name. And this is the bangle with the true lover's knot I promised you always to wear.
It is rather pretty, isn't it, Cecily?
Yes, you've wonderfully good taste, Ernest. It's the excuse I've always given for you leading such a bad life. And this is the box where I keep all your dear letters.
Cecily, my dear, I have never written you any letters.
You need hardly remind me of that, Ernest. I remember only too well that I was forced to write your letters for you. I wrote 3 times a week and sometimes oftener.
Oh, do let me read them, Cecily.
Oh no, I couldn't possibly.
What a perfect angel you are.
You dear romantic boy. I hope your hair curls naturally. Does it?
With the help of others, of course.
Oh, I'm so glad.
You will never break off our engagement, Cecily.
Oh, I don't think I could break it off. And now that I have actually met you. But, of course, there is the question of your name.
My name, Cecily? What on earth do you mean by my name?
You mustn't laugh at me, darling, but it has always been a girlish dream of mine to love someone of the name of Earnest. There is something in that name that seems to inspire absolute confidence. I pity any poor married woman whose husband is not called Earnest.
Cecily, you couldn't love me if I had any other name?
But what other name?
Algernon, for instance.
But I don't like the name of Algernon.
But Algernon is a rather aristocratic name. Cecily, really, you couldn't love me if I had any other name?
I might respect you, Ernest. I might admire your character. But I'm afraid I would not be able to give you my undivided attention.
Cecily, your rector here is thoroughly experienced in the rites and rituals of the church, I'd assume.
Oh yes, Dr. Chasuble is a most learned man. He's never written a single book, so you can imagine how much he knows.
I must speak to Dr. Chasuble on a matter of important christening. I mean, business. I'll see to you in half an hour, Cecily. Goodbye.
What an impetuous boy he is. I like his hair so much. I must copy his proposal into my diary.
Miss Fairfax called to see Mr. Worthing on very important business, Miss Fairfax states.
Isn't Mr. Worthing in his library?
Mr. Worthing went in the direction of the rectory some time ago.
Miss Fairfax. I suppose one of the many elderly women Uncle Jack works with in his philanthropic work. I don't quite like philanthropic work. I find it to be quite a bore.
Yes, miss.
Pray ask the lady to come out here. Mr. Worthing is sure to be back soon. And you can bring tea.
Yes, miss. Miss Fairfax?
Pray let me introduce myself to you. My name is Cecily Cardew.
Cecily Cardew! What a very sweet name. Something tells me we are going to be great friends. I like you already more than I can say. My first impressions of people are never wrong.
How nice of you to like me so much after we've known each other such a comparatively short time. Pray sit down.
I may call you Cecily. May I not?
With pleasure.
And you will always call me Gwendolyn, won't you?
If you wish.
Then that is all settled, is it not?
I hope so.
Perhaps this may be favourable from mentioning who I am. My father is Lord Bracknell. You have never heard of Papa, I suppose?
I don't think so.
Outside of the family circle, Papa, I am glad to say, is entirely unknown. I think that is quite as it should be. The home seems to me to be the proper sphere for the man. Cecily, Mamma, whose views on education are remarkably strict, has brought me up to be extremely short-sighted. So do you mind my looking at you through my glasses?
Oh, pray do so. I very much admire being looked at.
You are here on a short visit, I suppose.
Oh, no. I live here.
Oh, your mother or some other female relative of advanced years besides you also?
Oh, no. I have no mother, nor any relations.
Indeed.
My dear guardian, with the assistance of Miss Prism, has the arduous task of looking after me.
Your guardian?
Yes, I am Mr. Worthing's ward.
Oh. It is strange he never mentioned to me he had a ward. Confound. How secretive of him. He grows more interesting hourly. I am not sure, however, that the news inspires you with feelings of unmixed delight. I am very fond of you, Cecily. I have liked you ever since I met you. But I feel bound to state that now that I know you are Mr. Worthing's ward, I cannot help expressing the fact that you were a little older than you seem to be, and not quite so very alluring in appearance. In fact, if I may speak candidly...
Oh, pray do so. I think that whenever one has something unpleasant to say, one should always be quite candid.
Well then, to speak with perfect candour... Cecily, I wish you were fully 14, more than usually playing for your age. Earnest has a strong, upright nature. He is the very soul of truth and honour. But even men of the highest noble character can be extremely susceptible to the physical charms of others.
I beg your pardon, Gwendolyn. Did you say Earnest?
Yes.
Oh, but it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing that's my ward. It is his brother, his elder brother.
He never mentioned to me he had a brother.
Yes, it is not quite pleasing to say they have not been on good terms for quite some time.
Ah, that accounts for it. And now I think of it, I have never had many men mention their brothers. That subject seems quite distasteful to most men. But you are quite sure it is not Mr. Earnest Worthing who is your guardian?
Quite sure. In fact, I'm going to be...
I beg your pardon?
Dearest Gwendolyn, there is no reason why I should make it of any secret to you. Our little country newspaper is sure to chronicle the fact next week. Mr. Earnest Worthing and I are engaged to be married.
My dear Cecily, I feel there must be some slight error. Mr. Earnest Worthing is engaged to me. The announcement will appear on the Morning Post on Saturday at the latest.
I am afraid you must be under some misconception. Earnest proposed to me exactly 10 minutes ago.
It is certainly very strange, for he asked me to be his wife yesterday afternoon at 5:30. If you would like to verify the incident, pray do so. I never travel without my diary. I am so sorry, dear Cecily, if it is of any disappointment to you, but it appears I have the prior claim.
It would distress me more than I can tell you, dear Gwendolen, if it caused you any mental or physical anguish, but I feel bound to point out that since Ernest proposed to you, he has clearly changed his mind.
If the poor fellow has entrapped himself into any foolish promise, I shall make it my duty to rescue him at once and with a firm hand.
Whatever unfortunate entanglement my dear boy may have gotten into, I will never reproach him with it after we are married.
Do you allude to me, Miss Cardew, as an entanglement? You are presumptuous. On an occasion of this kind, it becomes more than one's moral duty to speak one's mind. It becomes a pleasure.
Do you suggest, Miss Fairfax, that I entrapped Ernest in an engagement? How dare you? This is no time for wearing the shallow mask of manners. When I see a spade, I call it a spade.
I am glad to say I have never seen a spade. It is obvious our social spheres are widely different.
Shall I lay the tea here as usual?
Yes, as usual.
Quite a well-kept garden, this is, Miss Cardew.
So glad you like it, Miss Fairfax.
I had no idea there were any flowers in the country.
Ah, flowers here are as common as people are in London.
I personally cannot understand how anybody manages to exist in the country. If anybody who is anybody does. The country absolutely bores me to death.
That is what the newspapers call agricultural depression, is it not? I believe the aristocracy are suffering from it very much at present. May I offer you some tea, Miss Fairfax?
Thank you.
Sugar?
No, thank you. Sugar is not fashionable anymore.
Butter.
Bread and butter. Cake is rarely seen at the best houses nowadays. Lumps of sugar, and though I asked most distinctly for bread and butter, you have given me cake. I am known for the gentleness of my disposition and the extraordinary sweetness of my nature. But I warn you, Miss Cardew, you may go too far.
To save my poor, innocent, trusting boy from the machinations of any other girl, there are no lengths to which I will not go.
I the moment I saw you, I distrusted you. I felt you were false and deceitful. I am never deceived in such matters. My best impressions of people are invariably right.
It seems to me, Miss Fairfax, that I am trespassing in your valuable time. No doubt you have calls of a similar character to make in the neighborhood. Ernest, my own Ernest!
Gwendolen, darling!
A moment. May I ask if you're engaged to be married to this young lady?
Oh, dear little Cecily, what could have put such an idea in your pretty little head?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must have been some misunderstanding, Miss Fairfax. The gentleman whose arm is present round your waist is my dear guardian, Mr. John Worthing.
John! Oh!
This is Uncle Jack. Here is Ernest.
My own love.
A moment. May I?
What could put your thought in your little head, Cecily?
Thank you. You may.
I knew there must be some slight error, Miss Cardew. The gentleman whose hand is holding yours is my cousin, Mr. Algernon Moncrief.
Algernon Moncrief? Oh! Are you called Algernon?
I cannot deny it.
Oh! Is your name really John?
I could deny it if I liked. I could deny anything if I liked. But no, my name is John. It has been John for years.
A gross deception has been practiced on the both of us. My poor wounded Cecily. My sweet wronged Gwendolyn. You will call me sister, will you not?
But there is just one question I would like to be allowed to ask my guardian.
An excellent idea. Mr. Worthing, there is one question I would like to be allowed to propose to you. Where is your brother Ernest? We are both engaged to be married to your brother Earnest, so it is a matter of some importance to us to know where your brother Earnest is at present.
Gwendolyn, Cecily, it's very painful for me to be forced to speak the truth. It is the first time in my life that I've been reduced to such a painful position. And quite frankly, I'm unexperienced in doing anything of the matter. However, I may tell you quite frankly that I have no brother Earnest. I have no brother at all. I've never had a brother, not even of any kind, and I do not intend of having one in the future.
No brother at all?
None!
Have you never had a brother of any kind?
Never! Not even of any kind.
It is obvious, my dear Cecily, that neither of us are engaged to be married to anyone.
It is not a very pleasant position for a young girl to suddenly find herself in, is it?
Come, let us go into the house. They would hardly venture to follow us in there.
No, men are so cowardly, aren't they?
Oh, this ghastly state of things is what you call bumbering, I suppose.
Yes, the most wonderful Bunbury it is. One of those wonderful Bunburys in my life.
Well, the only small satisfaction that I have in this wretched business is that your friend Bunbury is quite exploded. You won't be able to run out to the country as often as you used to, Algie, and a very good thing too.
And your brother is a little off colour, isn't he, Jack? You won't be able to run off to London as often as your wicked custom was, and not a bad thing either.
Oh, as for your conduct towards Miss Cardew, your taking it to a sweet, simple, innocent girl that way is quite inexcusable, not to mention that she is my ward.
And I can see no possible defence for your deceiving a most brilliant, clever, and thoroughly experienced young lady as Miss Fairfax, not to mention that she is my first cousin.
I wanted to be engaged with Gwendolyn, that is all. I love her.
And I simply wanted to be engaged to Cecily. I adore her.
I will take very good care that you never do.
And I can't see much likelihood of your ever being united with Fairfax.
How can you be eating while we're in this horrible trouble? I can't make out. You seem to me to be perfectly heartless.
Well, I can't eat muffins in an agitated manner. The butter would surely get on my cuffs. The only way to eat muffins is quite calmly.
I think your eating at all under the circumstances is quite heartless.
Well, when I am in great trouble, eating is the only thing that consoles me. In fact, as anyone who knows me intimately will tell you, I refuse nothing but food and drink. At the current moment, I'm eating muffins because I am unhappy.
That is no reason why you should eat them all in a greedy way.
Well, Jack, I wish you would take some tea cake instead. I don't like tea cake.
Good heavens, I suppose a man may enjoy his own muffins in his garden.
But I thought you had just said it was perfectly heartless to eat muffins.
I said it was perfectly heartless of you to be eating at all under the circumstances.
Yes, but the muffins are the same.
Algie! I wish to goodness you would go!
I'm afraid I cannot, for I have made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened at 5:45.
My dear fellow, the sooner you give up this nonsense, the better. I made arrangements with Dr. Chasuble to be christened myself at 5:30, and I will naturally take on the name of Earnest. Gwendolyn would wish it. We both can't be christened Earnest. It would be absurd. Besides, I have every right to be christened Earnest if I like. There is no evidence at all that I have been christened in the past. I should think it extremely probable, and so does Dr. Chasuble. It is entirely different in your case. You have been christened already.
Yes, but I have been christened for years.
Yes, But you have been christened. That is the important thing.
Quite so. So I know my constitution can stand it. I need hardly remind you that someone very close to you was nearly carried off this week in Paris by a severe chill. If you're not quite sure about your ever being christened, I think it rather dangerous you're venturing on it now. It might make you unwell. Jack, you are at it again, you're eating my muffins!
Alfie, I have already told you to go. I don't want you here. Why don't you go?
I haven't quite finished my tea yet.
You are drinking my tea.
And you're eating my muffins!
They are not your muffins!
The fact that they did not at once follow us into the house, as anyone else would have done, seems to me to show that they have some sense of shame left.
They are eating muffins! That looks like repentance.
They're looking at us! What effrontery!
They're approaching! That's very forward of them.
Let us presume to preserve a dignified silence.
Certainly. It is the only thing to do now.
This silence produces a most unpleasant effect.
Most distasteful.
But you will not be the first to speak.
Certainly not.
Mr. Worthing, there is one question I would like to be allowed to propose to you. Much depends on your reply.
Mr. Moncrief, kindly answer me the following question. Why did you pretend to be my guardian's brother?
So that I could have the opportunity of meeting you, Cecily.
His explanation seems quite satisfactory, does it not?
Mr. Worthing, what explanation can you offer to me for pretending to have a brother? Was it so you may come into town and see me as often as possible?
Certainly, Gwendolyn.
That does appear quite satisfactory.
I am more than pleased with what Mr. Moncrief said.
Do you think we should forgive them?
Yes! No. I mean, no.
True, I had forgotten. There are principles at stake that one cannot surrender. But who shall tell them? The task is not a pleasant one.
Could we not both speak at the same time?
An excellent idea. Will you take the time from me?
Certainly. Your Christian names are still an inseparable barrier. That is all.
Will you take the time from me? Our Christian names, is that all? But we are going to be christened this afternoon.
Only you are prepared to do this terrible thing.
I am.
To please me, you are ready to go through this fearful ordeal.
I am.
How absurd to talk of equality of the sexes. Where questions of self-sacrifice are concerned, men are infinitely beyond us.
We are.
They have moments of physical courage, of which we women know absolutely nothing.
My own.
Lady Bracknell.
Oh, good heavens!
Gwendolyn, what does this mean?
I am engaged to Mr. Worthing.
Sit down! Apprised, sir, of my daughter's sudden flight by her trusty maid, whose confidence I purchased by means of a small coin. I then followed by a luggage train. Of course, Mr. Worthing, you must understand that all communication between yourself and my daughter must cease to exist immediately from this moment on. On this point, as on all points, I am firm.
I am engaged to be married to Gwendolyn.
You are nothing of the kind, sir. And now in regards to Algernon. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta?
May I ask, is it in this house that your invalid friend, Mr. Bunbury, resides?
Bunbury isn't here at the moment. In fact, Bunbury is dead.
Dead? When did Mr. Bunbury die? His death must have been extremely sudden.
Bunbury has exploded. I killed Bunbury this afternoon. Poor Bunbury's physicians determined that poor Bunbury could not live, so Bunbury died.
Really? He seems to have taken great care in his physicians. I am glad, however, that he has taken a definite course of action and acted under proper medical care. And now that we have buried married Mr. Bunbury at last. May I ask you, Mr. Worthing, who is the young lady whose hand my nephew Algernon is holding to what seems to be an unnecessary manner?
That is Miss Cecily Cardew, my ward.
I am engaged to be married to Cecily.
I beg your pardon?
Mr. Moncrief and I are engaged to be married, Lady Bracknell.
I do not know what is so exciting in this part of the air of Hertfordshire, but the amount of engagements that go on seem to me to be considerably above the proper average that statistics have laid out for our proper guidance. I believe some preliminary inquiry on my part would not be out of place. Mr. Worthing, who is Miss Cardew?
Miss Cardew is the granddaughter of the late Mr. Thomas Cardew of 149 Belgrave Square, Southwest, Gervais Park, Dorking, Surrey, and the Sporran, Fifeshire, NB.
That sounds not unsatisfactory. 3 addresses always inspire confidence, even in tradesmen. So far, I am satisfied.
You will be also pleased to hear that I have in my possession certificates of Miss Cardew's birth, registration, baptism, whooping cough vaccination, confirmation, and the measles, both in the German and English variety.
Ah, a life crowded with incidents, but perhaps too exciting for a young girl. And now, Gwendolen, the time has come for our departure. We really must be going. And as a matter of form, Mr. Worthing, I had better ask if Miss Cardew has any little fortune.
Oh, just £130,000 in the funds, that is all. Goodbye, Lady Bracknell. So pleased to have seen you.
A moment, Mr. Worthing! £130,000 and in the funds! Miss Cardew seems to be a much attractive young lady now that I look at her. Come here, dear. Sweet child, your dress is sadly simple and your hair is just as nature has left it. However, that can soon be altered. A thoroughly experienced French maid can produce a marvelous effect in a brief space of time. I once recommended her to Lady Lansing, and after 3 months, her own husband didn't know her.
And after 6 months, nobody knew her.
Kindly turn around, sweet child. Algernon!
Yes, Aunt Augusta.
There are distinct social possibilities in Miss Cardew.
Cecily is the prettiest, sweetest, and youngest girl I've ever met, and I don't care 2 pence for social possibilities.
Never speak disrespectfully of society, Algernon. Only people who can't get into it do that. My dear child, of course you know that Algernon only has his debts to depend upon. But I do not approve of mercenary marriages. When I married Lord Bracknell, I had no fortune of any kind, but I hardly allowed that to stand in my way. Well, I guess I must give my consent.
Thank you, Aunt Augusta.
Cecily, you may kiss me.
Thank you.
The marriage, I hoped, had better happen quite soon.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you, Lady Bracknell, but I fear that this marriage is quite out of the question. I am Miss Cardew's ward. She cannot marry without my consent. Since I am her guardian, that consent I absolutely decline to give.
Upon what grounds, may I ask?
It pains me very much to have to speak frankly to you, Lady Bracknell, about your nephew, but I fear him of being untruthful.
Untruthful? My nephew Algernon? Impossible. He is not sane.
I fear there can be no possible doubt about the matter. This afternoon, during my temporary absence in London on an important question of romance, he obtained admission to my house by means of false pretense of being my brother. Under an assumed name, he succeeded in the course of the afternoon in alienating the affections of my only ward. He subsequently stayed to tea and devoured every single muffin. And what makes this all the more heartless is that he was perfectly aware from the start that I had no brother at all, not even of any kind. I distinctly told him so yesterday afternoon.
Mr. Worthing, I have decided to entirely overlook my nephew's conduct to you. Dear. How old are you?
Well, I am really only 18, but I always admit to 20 at evening parties.
It seems to me that soon you will be above the age and free from the restraints of tutelage. I do not think your guardian's consent is of any importance.
Pray excuse me for interrupting you yet again, Lady Bracknell, but you should be aware that, according to the terms on her grandfather's will, Miss Cardew does not come of age until she is 35.
That is not a grave objection. 35 is a very attractive age. London society is full of women by their own free will have remained 35 for years.
Algie, could you wait for me until I was 35?
Of course I could, Cecily. I could wait any length of time for you.
Yes, I felt it instinctively, although I don't think I could wait that long.
Then what is to be done, Cecily?
I don't know, Mr. Moncrief.
Mr. Worthing, as Miss Cardew states, she cannot wait until she is 35, a remark that seems to me to show an impatient nature. I must beg you to reconsider.
But Lady Bracknell, this matter is entirely in your hands. The moment you consent to my marriage with Gwendolen, I will happily allow your nephew to form an alliance with my ward.
Mr. Worthing, of course what you propose, you know, is completely out of the question.
Then, a passionate celibacy is all any of us can look forward to.
That is not the fate I propose for Gwendolen. Algernon can decide for himself. And Gwendolen, I really must insist, we really must be going. We've missed 5, if not 6 trains.
Is everything quite ready for the christenings?
Christening, sir? Is that not somewhat premature?
Both these gentlemen have expressed a desire for immediate christening.
At their age, the idea is grotesque and irreligious. Algernon, I forbid you to be christened. If Lord Bracknell found out this is how you wasted your time and money, he would be highly displeased.
Am I to understand then that there are to be no christenings at all this afternoon?
Dr. Chashbold, I fear that, as things now stand, it would be of no practical importance to us.
I'm grieved to hear such sentiments from you, Mr. Worthing, but I must return to the church at once. Indeed, I have just been informed that for the last hour and a half, Miss Prism has been waiting for me in the vestry.
Prism? Did I hear you mention a Miss Prism?
Yes, Lady Bracknell, I'm on my way to join her right now.
Pray allow me to detain you for a moment. Is this Miss Prism a female of the repellent aspect and remotely connected to education?
She is the most cultivated of ladies and the very picture of respectability.
It is obviously the same person. May I ask what position she holds in your household?
Oh, I'm celibate, madam.
Miss Prism is Miss Cardew's governess and valued companion.
I must see this Miss Prism at once. Let her be sent for.
I was told you expected me in the vestry, dear Canon. I've been waiting for you there for 1 hour and 3/4.
Prism!
Lady Bracknell!
Come here, Prism! Prism! 27 years ago, Prism, you left Lord Bracknell's house, 104 Grosvenor Street, in charge of a preambulator that contained a baby of the male sex. You never returned. After elaborate investigation with the Metropolitan Police, the preambulator was found at midnight in Bayswater. It contained a manuscript of a 3-volume novel of the most resentful sentimentality. But the baby was not there. Prism! Where is that baby?
Lady Bracknell, I admit with shame, I do not know. I only wish I did. On the morning of the day you mention, a day that is forever branded on my memory, I prepared as usual to take the baby out in the perambulator. I also had with me a somewhat old but capacious handbag in which I intended to place the manuscript of a work of fiction I'd been working on in my few unoccupied hours. In a moment of mental abstraction, I placed the manuscript in the bassinet and the baby in the handbag.
But where did you deposit the handbag?
Do not ask me, Mr. Worthing.
Miss Prism, this is of no small importance to me. I insist on knowing where you deposited the handbag.
In the cloakroom at Victoria Station, the Brighton line.
Gwendolyn, wait here for me.
If you will not long, I will wait for you all of my life.
What do you think this means, Lady Bracknell?
I dare not suspect Dr. Chasuble.
Uncle Jack seems strangely agitated.
Your guardian has a very emotional nature.
The suspense is terrible. I hope it will last.
Miss Prism, is this the handbag? Examine it carefully before you speak. The happiness of more than one life depends on it.
Yes, it appears to be mine. Yes, here is the injury it received during an incident with the Gower Street omnibus in younger and happier days. And here on the lock are my initials. The bag is undoubtedly mine. It's been a great inconvenience being without it all these years.
Miss Prism, more is restored to you than the handbag. I was the baby you placed in it.
You?
Yes, mother!
Mr. Worthing, I am unmarried.
Unmarried? I cannot deny that is a serious blow. But who is one to cast a stone against one who has suffered? Cannot repentance wipe an act of folly? Why should there be one law for men and another for women? Oh, it's all right. Mother, I forgive you!
Mr. Worthing, there is some error. There's the lady who can tell you who you really are.
Lady Bracknell, I hate to seem inquisitive, but would you kindly inform me of who I am?
I'm afraid the news I have will not altogether please you. You are the son of my poor sister, Mrs. Moncrief, and consequently, Algernon's elder brother.
Algy's elder brother?
My own brother!
I always knew I had a brother! I always said I had a brother! Cecily, how could you doubt me of having a brother? Dr. Chasuble, my unfortunate brother! Gwendolyn, my unfortunate brother!
My own! But what own are you now that you have become someone else?
I had entirely forgotten about that matter. Aunt Augusta! At the time that I was placed in the handbag, had I been christened already?
Every luxury that money could buy you has been lavished upon you by your fond and doting parents.
So I was christened then, so that clears that out. But what name was I given? Let me hear the worst.
Being the eldest son, you were naturally christened after your father.
Yes, but what was my father's name?
I remember now that the general was called Earnest. I knew I had a particular reason for disliking the name.
I knew from the first you could have no other name.
Gwendolyn at last! Leticia at last!
Frederick at last.
Cecily at last!
My own Ernest.
Because it has been a great journey, and it wouldn't have been possible without these. So, Erin.
Hello.
Our stage manager, by the way, a huge round of applause for her.
We would like to thank Mrs. Probst for being our director and being crazy and great and awesome and dealing with all of us, tech included, and all the stress and all the mishaps that have happened, and you've gotten through it, and even though you're pregnant and still crazy, you're still getting through it, so we would like to give you something. Come, please.
Could you come over here, please?
She sat all the way at the back. Good one. Sliles for being awesome and dressing literally everybody on this stage and dealing with vandalism and bad things and great things. Oh, and we'd also like to thank a lot of parents who helped us do things like Erin, our stage manager's mom, Mrs. Kelly, sewed many things over the past few weeks. Nicole, Gwendolyn's mom, Miss Ramos, and my grandma, Miss Ruiz. That's her last name. I know her last name, I promise.
And Lindsay's mom.
Lindsay's mom.
Mother. All these people have helped us so much with sewing and anything that we need for the show, and I just think that's pretty great. So we're saying thank you to them now. So.
One last thank you for you guys being an amazing audience. That was really great.
Yeah. The seniors have one last bow.
And now we're gonna have a last bow for our seniors.
Yeah. Come here, Erin. Come here. Yeah.
Awkward.
Yeah, okay. Thank you all so much for coming.